Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Shealey. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Y'all know what time it is. You know what time it is. It is Tamara for Georgia. We have a race to the United States Senate to win. So I just want to thank you for joining me this morning on the broadcast. I'm moving a little slow, but I'm here, y'all. I am here. It is December. It is December 4th. My. Can you believe how this year has come and almost gone, right? Like we are here. I'm excited. I'm excited for 2022. I really, really am. Again, we have a race to the United States Senate. I want to thank you for joining us. Joining me this morning, I have an exclusive interview that I am going to share in just a bit. But for those of you that follow me, you know I am. Good morning, family. Good morning. I am a reparationist, y'all. It is at the top of our agenda to the United States Senate. Reparations is a debt that is owed to us, those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery in this country. And reparations is an initiative that is being enacted around this country. There are municipalities that are getting the ball rolling for reparations in these United States. So, we're gonna get it where we can get it. It's gonna happen where it happens. And if it's happening on a municipal level before it happens on the federal level, it's still a step in the right direction. So it was an honor and y'all, I'm tongue-tied this morning. An honor and a privilege to interview Miss Rue Simmons. She is the Alderwoman out of Evanston, Illinois, where the first reparations initiative was actually introduced and passed. So this is not something that can't be done locally, but we have to be mindful how it's done. And Robin goes in to explain how and the why of what happened over in Evanston. But before we get into this interview, I am super excited to share it with you. But before we get into this interview, let's dive into what is happening with reparations. Let's kind of bring ourselves up to speed. So let me share my screen. This morning. Let's see. How do I do that? Share. Yes, let's start here. Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity is an initiative, y'all, that is where mayors have actually come together to organize around what reparations could look like in their prospective city. So this is a website where mayors around the country have come together to organize around reparations. Let's look at what their mission statement is. My internet is moving a bit slow. It says racial inequity in America was cemented and institutionalized for generations when restitution was denied to survivors of chattel slavery and human bondage, with their descendants stripped of the uniquely American promise of self-empowerment through legally enforced oppression, segregation, and discrimination officially sanctioned in both the public and private sector. So this is their start to their initiative with more mayors. It says the idea of reparations for Black Americans has been locked in a conversation that has hardly moved beyond a theory since the end of the Civil War. It says the members of Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity are committed to moving that needle with action and advocacy that points towards justice and healing the wounds of history. It says our coalition stands on the belief that cities can and should act as laboratories of bold ideas that can be transformative for racial and economic justice on a larger scale, and demonstrate for the country how to pursue and improve initiatives that take a reparatory approach to confronting and dismantling structural and institutional racism. So this is the mayors that have started out around the country with their initiative to address reparations on a municipal level. And just to share with you who these mayors are: the mayor of Los Angeles, Denver, Colorado, mayor of St. Louis, Missouri, Tallahassee, Oklahoma, Providence, Rhode Island, Austin, Texas, Durham, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Kansas City, Missouri, Sacramento, California, St. Paul, Minnesota, Carborough, North Carolina, and Stockton, California. So these are the mayors that are initiating this reparations and equity in their cities, right? So wanted to bring you some articles before we dive into the interview with Rue Simmons. Wanted to bring you a couple articles. So this is an article out of West Hollywood, California. It says, WeHo, which is West Hollywood, California, may give reparations to Black residents for housing discrimination in the last century. So here's an article that I found. It says, talking to the residents of WeHo, it says, your tax dollars might soon be spent making reparations for systemic racial discrimination rooted in the earliest 20th century. It says, City Council is looking to spend $100,000 on a historical context study to determine the extent to which the historic Black community in West Hollywood was affected by redlining, the covertly racist method of grading the desirability of residential neighborhoods in Los Angeles County, a system that began in the late 1930s. It says redline communities struggled to receive federally backed home loans, making property ownership more difficult for residents and perpetuating the decline of the neighborhoods. It says those policies are believed to have preserved racial segregation, exacerbated poverty, and allowed for a continued wealth gap between white Americans and other minority groups in the long term. It says the study, as envisioned by council members John Erickson and Mayor Pro Tem Seppi Shine, who authored the proposal, aims to produce better understanding of the complex history of West Hollywood prior to its incorporation in 1984. This article goes on to say the proposal does not mention reparations to the Jewish community nor any non-Black minority populations. It says the study presumably would provide a rationale for the community reparations program that Erickson and Shine have proposed. But what do they mean by reparations? It says restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition that redress gross violations of international human rights law or serious violation of international humanitarian law. Says according to the staff report, quoting a definition used by the United Nations. It says the report details how a handful of U.S. cities have attempted to define reparations. Here's where they talk about Evanston. It says Evanston pledged $10 million to Black residents or their descendants who lived in the city from 1919 to 1969 and suffered housing discrimination. It says each household is eligible for $25,000 to be used for home repairs, down payment, or property or interest late penalties paid for by the taxes on recreational cannabis. So Robin, in the interview in just a few minutes, she will be addressing how these reparations will be paid. It says Asheville, North Carolina has a reparations program that does not include direct payments to individuals. Instead, it funds investments in areas where Black residents face disparities, including efforts to increase minority home ownership and access to affordable housing. So that is an article out of West Hollywood where they may be initiating a reparations, quote unquote, program or initiative. One more article before we dive into Robin's interview, but this is out of Boston. It says Boston could be the next city to consider reparations for Black residents. It says at the end of Boston's long wharf is a glass and metal slab that tells a story of the city's role in the transatlantic slave trade. It says the monument stands to remind those walking along the waterfront that Boston was a hub for ships carrying African people who were sold into slavery. It says the marker could be seen as a symbol of how the city is grappling with its past. But when it comes to slavery and the centuries of systemic racism that followed, folks like NAACP Boston President Tanisha Sullivan want more than symbols for Black people. They want reparations. It says some cities and towns across the country have begun initiatives to address reparations for Black residents who have been impacted by systemic racism, and Boston could soon join them. All right, Boston. It says at-large City Councilor Julie Mingia is leading an effort in City Hall to establish a commission that would examine the negative effects of slavery and racial discrimination on Boston's Black residents and how the city can repair the damage. It goes on to say, even though slavery happened years ago, this is so much more than just slavery. This is Mingia. It's really about addressing the harm that has been caused and how we continue to pass on generational poverty year after year to Black Bostonians. It says Mingia recently hosted a hearing where supporters of reparations called for the commission. She said her goal is to pass a bill to establish the group next year. So this is Mingia. Goes on to talk about the U.S. House of Representatives is considering legislation that would establish a federal reparations commission to study the impact of slavery and its legacy on Black Americans and offer ways to remedy the damage. The idea was first introduced more than 30 years ago. Congress has never approved it, and it is likely to fail again this session. Well, that's a lie. Look, if we keep our finger on it, we could get it done. So we're not going to receive that, right? Says, but that hasn't stopped local officials from places like nearby Cambridge and Amherst, and further afield San Francisco and Asheville, North Carolina, from pursuing reparations initiatives of their own. It says this is a federal issue, and nationally we need to wrestle with and reckon with the issue of our history, says Sullivan, who is working with Mingia to get the commission established. But there's also work that can be done at the local level. We don't have to wait for the federal government to take action. It says Boston's role in slavery can be traced back to 1638, where slave ships sailed from the city, even after Massachusetts outlawed slavery in 1783. And though slavery ended in the state, Black Bostonians were denied the same rights and privileges that allowed their white counterparts to prosper. That discrimination has tangible consequences today in the city's Black communities, as the city's Black communities lag behind in areas like wealth, education, and health. The article goes on to say people often associate reparations with the idea of cash payments to Black people from the government. That's one way to do it, but some municipalities are taking different approaches. Well, that's how we're going to do it when we get to Congress. It says Cambridge is exploring a reparations program that will provide money to Black-owned businesses. It says officials in Amherst recently established a reparations fund and created a group to develop a plan for the money. It says Evanston is lauded as the first U.S. city to pay reparations to its Black residents. However, here's the pushback, y'all. And I asked Robin about the pushback in the interview, so you'll hear it from her. It says, however, Evanston's Alderwoman Cicely Fleming is not on board. It says, this is her words, Evanston is a place that likes to be the first at things, says Fleming, who cast the only dissenting vote against the program. It also likes to kind of meet the standard of being very diverse. This definitely fit into that narrative. Y'all, she really pushing back. Flemington said Evanston basically launched a housing program that is only available to a select few residents, disguised as a reparations program. Also, she said the program doesn't give Black residents the freedom to decide how to use the funds. It says the Alderwoman said Evanston's reparations program should not be a model for other cities. That's her words, y'all. I'm just reading the article. She says, I would say don't model it, but people have their own communities. She said, I don't know what their community needs. I don't know what the harms have been in their community by their local government, but I would say at least have something fleshed out to make sure you can meet the needs of all the residents, of which we do not have at this point. Y'all, that hate is real. I don't know what that is. Says, while the idea for reparations in Boston isn't new, Sullivan said that a city council hearing has been officially documented, and future proponents have something to build on. It says, for the first time, said Sullivan, we are building a structure around which a record can be established on this issue of reparations for the descendants of formerly enslaved Black folks. So Boston, Massachusetts, reparations is looks like it's headed your way, but I am excited to bring to you a video. I actually pre-recorded my interview with Robin, so let's get it started, y'all. I'm gonna mute myself and bring in this. All right, thank you for joining us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in these United States. Look who I have in the midst, y'all. Miss Robin Rue Simmons, y'all. We know who she is, and if you don't, let me tell you, y'all. Evanston, Illinois, the first city, the first municipality to put a foot in this thing and say, guess what? We're going to pass a reparations initiative. It may not be what we all anticipate or expect it to be, but we're going to take a big first step. And we have the Robin Rue Simmons. Thank you, Robin, for joining us.
I'm very happy to be here. You know, I will accept any invitation to talk reparations. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. You were Alderwoman at the time when Evanston, when you all decided, like, we want the scoop. Like, what happened? Like, how did this come to fruition? Because it did. It came to fruition, Robin. And thank you for being the Alderwoman to say, I'm going to do this.
So it happened, you know, the legislative process started in 2019, as we know it today. But really, it was like you know, I ran for elected office, intentional on serving the Black community. That's where I was born and raised. It's where I live on purpose today. And I knew that we were excluded. We were, you know, disenfranchised. We were underrepresented. We were not enjoying the same livability as the rest of Evanston. And I was committed to legislative change, policy change, funding that was specific to empowering and strengthening the Black community. Now, it wasn't until 2 years into my term in 2019 that I realized that was actually reparations. I didn't run on a reparations platform. I ran on a Empower the Black Community platform. But in 2019, I realized that the goals for HR 40, the goals for reparations for Black people in this nation, had really been discussed at a federal level, congressional action, HR 40 being introduced every year since 1989. And I realized in that moment that it's not just the institution of slavery. It wasn't just Jim Crow, and it was actually many eras of harm, many incidents, many egregious acts, not just from the federal government, but there were some local as well. And I was looking at our data in Evanston, and I saw that at that time we had a $46,000 household income divide between Black and white Evanston and all these other racial gaps. And I knew that we had some pretty specific historical anti-Black policies. Wasn't exactly sure on what they were, but I knew that we needed repair in Evanston. We needed reparations. And so I wasn't in Congress. I was, however, an elected Alderwoman in Evanston, and I thought, I'm going to use the full authority of this local office to do something for my friends and neighbor, my family, this village that raised me, and we're going to do reparations for Evanston while we also support HR 40, obviously. And so I made that introduction in February of 2019 and began leading our city through a legislative process that it concluded in November of 2019 with Resolution 126R19 passing. It turns out to be the nation's first municipal-wide funded reparation initiative. Didn't know it at the time. I was not looking at it to be the first, was really just looking at what I could do. And excuse me, canceling that. And so we passed it, and it was later that we found out that we were had made a historic commitment in our city, and we continue to do the work. You know, we're one municipality. There's a lot of pressure on us now to get it right for all of Black America, and we're doing our best to do our part for reparations and continue advancing the work.
So go back a step. What was that like when you sitting alderwoman and bringing this idea to to your city council? Like, what was that like? Were they receptive? Like, what was that?
So Evanston's a special city. And so although we have these historic harms and the racial segregation, we also are known for our progressive values and our intent for diversity and inclusion. So I can say that I did not have much pushback. I had two of my colleagues that said, can we call it anything but reparations? Still do exactly what you want to do, but let's not call it reparations, because reparations is provocative, I heard. But I built my case, and they ended up being among the strongest, most educated and informed supporters of reparations. So my colleagues on city council were receptive. The city of Evanston at large was receptive. Staff has embraced it and begun to operationalize the work. Institutional partners in town have been supportive. They haven't done their part, because it's not just for you to pat us on the back, it's for you to also look at your own history and do your part. But we have had broad support in Evanston. Allies are growing. We have a strong relationship with the Jewish community here in town. Among our biggest allies, the Japanese American community as well. A Mexican leader in our community was among one of my first letters of support for reparations in 2019. So I'm acknowledging that it is a different city. The conversation might need to be introduced differently in a city in Georgia or some other place, but our experience here was to embrace it. Some of the biggest concern was liability, knowing that we would have legal challenges, not even from our own community, from outside of our community. And that in fact happened. So we had threats of legal challenges. And so I had some, colleagues that were concerned about, how do we frame this so that it has a legal muster, that is constitutional, and that we are protecting our city as a whole while also advancing. And that's a valid concern that we worked through together. So we're working through it now with a strong legal. Our corporation counsel is Nick Cummings, a brother that is really committed to reparations and defending the city of Evanston and continuing our goal for reparations in Evanston.
Yeah. So with the pushback, were there any lawsuits? Were there any filed lawsuits?
So we have a notice of a lawsuit. We don't have a lawsuit yet. We do have another firm, and I should state that all of these are conservative groups, not in Evanston, not in Illinois, not even in our region. I think one is in DC, one is in Texas, maybe. And so we have another that has filed lawsuits more FOIA related. So I would consider this more intimidation than anything, because it's not specific to the reparations lawsuit. But we did receive one early on that, this is unconstitutional, and moving forward would result in a lawsuit. And we're prepared for that. Our legal team, led by Nick Cummings, is prepared. We have pro bono attorney and law firms and law schools that are on standby to help build capacity for our law department and support our law department if we should go to any sort of actual legal action.
Yeah. And their pushback is race.
It's reverse racism.
Reverse racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So which means what? Explain to the audience that may not understand reverse racism. Like, they feel discriminated against because they are of another hue other than Black.
Right. So you just explained it. That's exactly it. And so they should have the same access to this form of justice. And because they are not Black, they're also not harmed. They're also not discriminated against. But because they are not Black, this benefit is not for them, and therefore it's racist against them. Yes. Yes. You should do a whole nother segment on that alone. But you know what? Our law department, like I said, it fully expected it. That's an easy expected case, right? That's actually just lazy. So we're moving forward with confidence that if this is a legislative matter, we are a home rule municipality, and we have decided as a city to begin to repair the damages we are responsible for in our Black community. We have acknowledged the harm. We had anti-Black housing and zoning laws that we enforced starting in 1919, and they were enforced until fair housing was passed. So until 1969, we had anti-Black housing policies that we enforced. We've acknowledged that, and we are beginning our road to repair. A long road ahead of us, acknowledging that even our first remedy initiative alone is not enough. But reparations is a process. It is a long, complex process that requires many organizations and institutions and leaders to participate. And we have begun that process in Evanston.
Yeah, and the word reparations, because it's been used on this national stage, which HR 40 and S40, the word reparations, it's, I follow the work of Dr. William Sandy Darity, and he has described it, that the culpable party is the federal government, because for the masses of us, any kind of policy initiated on a municipal level or a state level. Here in Georgia, we have HB 541, and I'll share that with you because you may not know about, there's a bill here that doesn't say reparations, but it's akin to reparations. And I actually am one of the lead advocates with that piece of legislation. So how, with the word reparations, talk about that, because you got a lot of pushback because the word has been used to describe the national agenda to redress us as a people.
Right. So, and you're right, but the word reparations and the process of reparations and reparations of any form is not, proprietary or exclusive to a congressional action. Redress and repair reparations is a form of restitution, compensation, some sort of redress, cessation, rehabilitation, to repair a harm done to a particular community. And in this case, in the case of Evanston, we're talking about the city of Evanston as the injuring party, the Black community of Evanston as the harmed community, and reparations as a vehicle and justice to address those harms in a legislative way with tangible outcomes. So this is in no way to interfere with or to certainly compete with the goals of HR 40. Our city supported HR 40 with a legislative resolution in 2002. We passed a resolution in support of reparations for slavery. It was led by Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste. He was then the alderman of the Second Ward. And we maintain that support today. But we are acknowledging that while Congress is sitting on HR 40 and not sending it to the House for a House vote, and while S40 is, what does it have? 10 co-sponsors?
22.
Okay. Sorry. 22 co-sponsors. So while we have HR 40 since 1989 had never even passed out of committee. It just passed out of judiciary for the first time in 30 years in April of this year. So does that mean that we do nothing in our city for what we're responsible for? Absolutely not. There is precedent that significant federal legislation is passed once there is local actions, local legislation, just like school desegregation and ban the box and marriage equality and cannabis, right now, eventually there'll probably be some federal legislation there, but there's precedent that local actions inspire. And so what we've seen is since we introduced and passed local reparations and more local reparation actions have taken place since 2019, where there were maybe 70, opening co-sponsors on HR 40, I think 66 to be exact. Now there's, 200 yes votes, 194 co-sponsors in the House, more yes votes, and more momentum that we've seen in generations for HR 40. And so we're aware that we're not going to address all of our racial inequalities with the local reparations initiative in Evanston, but we're not okay not doing more or doing our part as we continue our support for HR 40.
Let's go back, because these words is where we got to get it right. So when I'm gonna ask this question, but I actually have a second question. But the word Black, when you say Black, who are these Black people?
Black people are people of African descent.
Mm-hmm. So specifically, this initiative says those who are of African descent who were discriminated against between 1919 and what is it?
1969.
1969. Those are the people that are eligible for this repair.
Exactly. And what it says more specifically is African American. And so we have a very diverse Black community. I use Black. Everyone refers to themselves how they want. But we have a diverse Black community in Evanston, meaning we have a large Caribbean community, a large, we have an Afro-Latino community. We have a Black community here in Evanston. And we are looking to address harm specific to Evanston city government. And we had those communities here during that period of injury, 1919 and 1969. So there's no separation of Black in Evanston. And I love that, because that's the type of community that I've grown up in. And we all, have descended from the continent. So we have a reparation initiative that is for everybody Black that fits within that period of harm, which is 1919 to 1969. And that includes Haitians and, Jamaicans and Panamanians and so on.
And on the federal level, the pushback is going to be for those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery.
Mm-hmm. Very aware of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so in Evanston, and when folks want to have that debate with me, it's not a debate in Evanston. We're not talking. This is not the crimes and the acts and the egregious harms that we are addressing here in Evanston are vestiges, or they are legacies of slavery. But this is not for enslavement era harms. This is for specific to Evanston. And every city's local initiative is going to be different, because they've had different laws and different harms. And our city happened to have laws that were related to housing, and therefore our remedy will be related to housing or wealth building models, because of the harm stripping away opportunities of wealth because of us not having access to housing in certain parts of town, and how our area was devalued in different ways, stripped of a school, stripped of important neighborhood amenities, still a food desert today. We have some environmental injustices. So we have specific harms in Evanston, and unfortunately, the entire Black community has experienced those harms within that period of injury.
Yeah. So go back to so the fear is that part of the fear is that the federal government will see these localized initiatives as you're already getting something. So have you gotten that kind of pushback as well?
I've heard it. I think that it's just another distraction, personally. I mean, what other federal legislation have you heard where they say, oh no, don't have a recycling program in your community because it's going to interfere with the National Climate Action Plan, or don't work on violence reduction strategies in your neighborhoods because we haven't yet passed whatever this next thing is going to be a federal legislation. So I personally think that it is a distraction. We've seen the complete opposite. In fact, we have seen Congress people, including Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and my own Congresswoman Jan Jakowski, be even more emboldened in support of these local initiatives and using it to build their case to pass HR 40. So it's been the complete opposite of a distraction from HR 40. It has supported these local initiatives, are the voice of the constituencies of Congress people. They have to hear if this happening at a local level. In fact, we also demand that this happens at a federal level. We're doing our micro reparation approach right now, what we can do, but our expectation is that Congress and your congressperson, that you pass a legislation. And so in every community that I speak with personally, and those that I have seen, they have also a commitment and a charge to Congress to pass HR 40 while they're doing what they can locally. I don't think there's any city out here, certainly not Evanston, that thinks that we can, with any local initiative, address the harms in our Black community, not just in this nation, but even our Black community. We don't have the resources. We don't have the capacity. Our city alone is not responsible for the harm in the Black community. So not only is it the city of Evanston, it should be the state of Illinois. It should be Cook County. It should be the United States government. It also should be our local educational institutions and financial institutions, and even some businesses and foundations that are in town. So reparations is a process. It takes participation from the entire community, this entire nation. Of course, the federal government is the main party responsible. But in the meantime, while we're fighting for HR 40, localities can be doing their part as well, and they're beginning to do so.
Yeah. So cannabis is how y'all are going to pay for this.
Correct.
Talk about that a little bit.
So we, at the same time that I was leading reparations in our city, the state of Illinois was also beginning to pass recreational cannabis. And it was really just a divine intersection. It was not my initial thought for funding. My initial thought for funding was actually a graduated real estate transfer tax that we had just passed the year before. And that was a premium tax on property sold above $1 million. And my thought was that since our harm was largely housing related, that we would take that property tax and fund our reparations initiative. That would allow, an ongoing fund. And, we have, high property values here in Evanston, so we could have had ongoing revenue stream. But at the same time, cannabis passed in Evanston, and we needed a funding source that would be robust and one that we could really build out a strong initiative and commitment, ongoing commitment. The cannabis industry has harmed our community. It was also appropriate that with the new legalization of the industry, there be multi-billion dollars in revenue, and that we should benefit since we have been harmed. So a report that I requested showed that, in fact, in our city, 71% of our marijuana arrests were in the Black community, and we're only 16% of the population. So there was outrageous over-policing that happened in the Black community as it relates to cannabis. Of course, those arrests impacted our ability to access, rental units and school funding and jobs and so on. That harmed families, that harmed communities and so on. So it was appropriate that the revenue now coming from that industry in our city help us with repairing the community that was harmed. And so we're using, we tax it at 3% from the state, and that 3% sales tax revenue goes into our reparations fund.
Decriminalization, was that part of the legalization of cannabis in your state?
So it absolutely was. It was part of the state law, the state cannabis package of policies. That in terms of decriminalization, as well as social equity priorities for the business side. So social equity licenses for dispensaries and other cannabis related businesses have been prioritized. But we had begun that work in our city even prior to the recreational cannabis passing in 2020 with reducing some cannabis possessions to tickets instead of a criminal charge. So we had already begun to make that commitment, and the state has increased the commitment with state law now that decriminalizes and prioritizes certain backgrounds to have access to the business. Now I'm hearing that there's been a lot of challenges with the social equity cannabis licenses rolling out, and that we've already done a significant amount of revenue in the state, and those social equity licenses have not been issued yet, and there's some challenges there. So that's something that I want to be more educated on, so that I can advocate to make sure that Black folks are also getting those licenses and being able to operate, getting the funding that we need, because we already are undercapitalized because of all of our systemic barriers that we deal with. So that's an area that needs some more attention as well.
Yeah. So you are no longer an alderwoman. So where are you now? Firstrepair.org. What is this, and what are you doing now?
That's right. So I retired from my elected office in March of this year to inform and advance reparations full time. And I am at First Repair. I'm the executive director and founder of First Repair. We are a not-for-profit that is informing local reparations nationally. And full-time, I, work to support other cities, other leaders, foundations, other institutions on how they might begin their road to reparations. What is their responsibility as a university or a foundation or a family foundation, as a business, as a city, as a municipality, as a state, and what steps might you take using best practices that have been proven from my work in Evanston, and then also learning along the way, a lot of learning from other cities and other states, other leaders, academics and economists. So I'm doing a lot of learning and sharing, but advancing and informing and advocating for reparations in cities, and also doing the same for the support of HR 40.
Yeah, I was going to tell you earlier, HB 541 here in Georgia is a bill that doesn't specifically say reparations, but it is a bill to study the impact of slavery on those of us who are descendants of slaves right here in Georgia. So there's initiatives, and of course, I'm sure you know AB 3121 out in California. They've been having their hearings. Other states have done. So this reparations is on fire, right?
It is on fire. And so one thing I'll tell you, I'm very excited about, in about a week, First Repair, along with NARC, which is the National African American Reparations Commission, we will host up to 50 local reparation leaders here in Evanston. And we will share the history of what happened in Evanston. We'll give an actual physical tour of the city to show the racial segregation historically and where it is today. We will have working sessions and learn from other cities and states, elected leaders that will be here, as well as grassroots leaders that will be here. We'll be learning together, walking away with best practices and supporting one another in our independent efforts for reparations, while also standing together behind Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and near 200 House co-sponsors in support of HR 40 and bringing HR 40 to the floor. So that happens on December 9th through 11th here in Evanston, and we will have a town hall meeting on December 10th, and we're really looking forward to that.
So you're doing the work, Robin, and you're staying in the fight. Did you see this coming? Because you went from wanting to serve locally to now you have this national, literally it's a national agenda now.
Yeah, so not at all. I was so busy minding my business. I was so hyper local. Like, I'm literally looking at policy that can address my friends, family, and neighbors, the folks that are calling me that, can't access housing, can't find a living wage job, dealing with environmental injustice, air quality issues. Like, that's who was on my mind when I introduced reparations. I really was not thinking about HR 40 or what someone else didn't do and who has the best idea. I was really thinking about what can I do? And I use timelines and deadlines to hold myself accountable to the work, because there's so many issues, you can get lost in it. And at the time that I was advancing it, it was the year of 400 years of resilience, right? It was, the year of the return. And, we were commemorating 400 years in 1619. It was 2019. Mm-hmm. And so I used 2019 as a hard stop for me to at least get the first piece of this legislation passed. I also knew it would be important, as I was not running for reelection. I knew that within a year of being in office, that I needed to get it substantially completed before my term was up, so that it could have some legs beneath it and be codified in a way. And so I used those dates, and it wasn't, it still, I don't want to say it amazes me, but it certainly was a surprise to see that it was unprecedented, and that it was so well received by other cities. And there's so much interest in doing something similar, appropriate for other cities. Now, there's no one blueprint, no one model is right. Every city has its own history. Every state has its own history. This work is very intimate. It's specific to the Black folks in those individual communities to lead. So no, I did not expect this. And I'm so grateful to be able to wake up every day and advance reparations for Black people, because it has done already so much that is not being measured. It's held institutions accountable. It's created space for more inclusion on boards, committees, and commissions, and other places where decisions are made for Black people. It has our community intentionally shopping Black, like literally, where can I find a Black this product or this service? It has emboldened Black people to speak out and try new legislation and start new organizations and run for office. And so already, even though we haven't seen the direct return yet, because we aren't going to start dispersing until in the next couple of months, we're seeing all of this residual benefit. Ally communities are educating themselves on their role and how we have sustained, what is white fragility and white privilege and implicit bias, and educating themselves on reparations. And so this first step has done so much for our city in terms of beginning to repair. We have a long road. We have not figured it out yet, but we are beginning to take significant, tangible, measurable, funded steps that before were largely just ceremonial, and routine and tradition without any real impact. So I'm just really grateful to be able to do this work and learn from so many people like you and other scholars that have been studying reparations for a long time.
Before we let you go, disbursement, how is that looking for the residents of Evanston? How's that looking?
So we have opened and closed our applications. They were open for about 6 weeks. Our first initiative, we have 620 applications. We're a small community. I should probably mention that. We're a city of 75,000, 16% Black. So we have 620 applications. Those that are directly harmed will be selected first. So those that lived here between 1919 and 69. And then next will be direct descendants, those that were descendants of those that lived here during that time period. And so we have closed the application. We have 163 of those 620 are in the directly harmed category. And the selection will happen in the next month. And so as this is funded by sales tax revenue, the revenue is coming in incrementally. So we have funded our first $400,000 to disperse. And so we will select our first 16 reparation beneficiaries in the coming weeks. and we will continue the program over the next 10 years. Now, my hope was always that future councils will move to extend this work beyond 10 years, and really it should probably be in perpetuity, but certainly beyond the 10 years. But that will be for future councils to decide, but I certainly will be there advocating for that to happen.
Robin, we just want to say thank you for being in this fight. You know, this is a journey. And obviously for you, it sounds like a lifelong journey. Like you are literally walking in your purpose, because you didn't even see this coming at all.
No, I didn't. I was, like I said, focused on Black empowerment and justice, racial justice for the Black community, and just so grateful to even have access to some of the folks that have been giants to me, like just mentors that I never met before, through their reading and their teaching and their scholarship, and other advocates that have been in the struggle for so long, like Dr. Iva Carruthers and attorney Nikichi Taifa, and so many others that I now am able to work with in this fight. Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste here in Evanston, Cam Howard, who does great work. It's just been a real honor to learn from them. And it's accelerated my leadership, because I've been able to reach out directly and say, have we thought about this? Or was this ever implemented? And they can give me the history of it, and I can kind of reimagine it, or put a little innovation to it, and maybe think about taking an action. And it's been really great. I'm so honored to do this.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Robin Rue Simmons. Robin, thank you for all the great work, and I am honored that you gave me the opportunity to interview you. And we're going to stay in touch. So stay with me for a few minutes. I'm going to pause for just a second.
Thank you. But before you cut it, I need to thank you. Thank you for being bold enough to be a candidate that is unafraid to say reparations and camouflage it as something else. It is reparations. That's justice. Anything less is insufficient for what we have experienced in this nation. And so it takes a lot of heart. And I want you to know that I am supporting you, and I will make sure that others are supporting you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Robin. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you. All right. That was my interview with Miss Robin Rue Simmons. I know for some of you that may be a lot to digest, but I'm not going to even go there this week. I'm going to let us marinate, pray, meditate, whatever you need to do on this interview with Robin. I know there's lots of questions. And I've already been hit in the back channel, and I've already been hit in all these spaces about, there's lots of questions. So we're not going to go there this week. We're going to let this simmer. I'll bring it back next Saturday for a part 2. Yeah, let's do that. We're going to bring it back next Saturday for a part 2. So I am Tamara Shealey. And again, I want to thank Miss Robin Rue Simmons out of Evanston, Illinois, for being my guest and allowing me to interview her specific to reparations. And I am going to stay in touch, because this is a bigger fight, and I am working as hard as I can, giving it everything I have for us to win our race to the United States Senate, so that we can get reparations for those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery in this country. So again, I am Tamara Shealey. You can, if you would, go to the website, y'all. The website actually has podcasts on there now. We're taking it to the next level. Go to the website, TamaraShealey.com, giving voice to issues, activists, and activism. For those of you who missed the interview with Judy Mikovits, when we talked about the vaccine and I got shut down on YouTube, that podcast is on the website. So if you have not seen it and you want to see it, Healthy After the Vax, go watch it. Go listen. Go listen. It's on the website, TamaraShealey.com. Support the broadcast. This is independent media. We have to tell our own stories. We have to be our own voice. Traditional media is not going to do it. So we have to do it for ourselves. Support me as I continue to do this. This is independent of my campaign. This is my broadcast, Tamara for Georgia. Again, you know, we are headed to Washington. May 24th, 2022 is election day. May 24th, 2022 is election day. Y'all, that's 5 months. I'm speechless because it's right around the corner. It's right around the corner. We don't have time. So get on board. Go to the website. Donate. Get on board. We hitting it hard in January. Hard. It's all hands on deck. All hands on deck. You know, I work alongside churches in the reparations movement. And we are spreading the word about reparations and what it means and all this work that needs to be done. We need our churches. Reparationssunday.com. Go to the website. If you are here in Georgia, HB 541, support the commission. HB 541 is a commission to study the impact of slavery on those of us who are descendants of slaves right here in the great state of Georgia. So please, if you are right here in Georgia, support this initiative. You can find me on ClubHouse on Tuesdays, White Women for Reparations, y'all. We are reading a book. I can't even remember. It's so much in my head today, but we're listening to a book. We're listening to a book on Tuesdays on the ClubHouse app, White Women for Reparations. So join us 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the ClubHouse app. Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, hard conversations, white women, black women, let's talk. I tell you, we go there. We went there this past Thursday. That room was tense. But guess what? We do this in love and with respect, and we just keep talking because we have to get this right. We have to get this right. So if you have not gone to the website, please do. Polish and Politics is my holiday season fundraiser. Go to the website, y'all. Participate. You can find some really nice gifts. And when you give to the campaign, we give you something to give or something for yourself. Go to the website, y'all. TamaraForGeorgia.com/fundraisers, Polish and Politics. Go and support us this holiday season. All right, get your campaign swag, y'all. Here's my cup. Here's my mug. Get your campaign swag, y'all. Go get a mug. Go get a t-shirt. Please get your campaign swag. Go to the website, y'all. Again, TamaraForGeorgia.com/fundraisers and get your campaign swag. Cheers. All right. Like, again, I said, let's let this conversation simmer. Let's just kind of see where it goes. I'll bring it back next week and we can have the conversation. We can go there and we can have put some thought to it. You know, let's just let it kind of settle with us about what we heard today and how we move forward collectively as a movement for reparations across this country. So I am Tamara Shealey, and I will see you back next Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, y'all. See you next week.
When we come to Washington in this campaign, we're coming to get our check. Young prodigies. Grow. Free.
Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud, 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream, my legacy, you can't stop me. Coming for our 40 acres, HR 40 and our paper.
Kicking the door, coming for our 40 acres and more. Our 6.4 trillion. Miss said no, we fought the Civil War. We came from the poor.
Start from the bottom, we still on the floor. We pray to the Lord.
Amen.
Picking the cotton, our fingers are sore.
Straight out the underground, escaping from slavery. The only cemeteries that we had were the trees. Watching our bodies while they blew in the breeze. Niggas to the north side to get free.
That way came from slavery. Where's all the man wants to stay on me? Put her head on the door, but the world won't scheme. Stick to the north side to get free.
Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud, 1, 2, mic check. acres, ain't y'all 40 and I
Look,
pay
we
for
taking them back. Putting Pettis Bridge on the map. Police came with the strap. That son niggas buddy, no cap.
Stop capping.
Speaking of cap, Kaepernick taking knees at the flag. Where my justice at? We built this nation, better give me them racks. All fat, just a match and a little bit of gasoline. 4 girls got bombed back in 63.
400 years, yeah, we still ain't free. I'll rise, we rise, take a knee.
Kaepernick.
Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud, 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream, my legacy, you can't stop me.
Coming for our 40 acres, ain't y'all 40 and I pay for
We stuck in the trap with no shoes, trying to pull up bootstraps. Increasing the gap. Wealth got bigger, so we had to adapt. Discriminated cause we black. I know it worth more than I know it's a fact. They tryna feel scraps. Strike me on board so we can't come back.
30 years ago on April 19, you said and try Remy chemical read.
If it happened to them, think it happened to me. Screaming out of